السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا وقرة أعيننا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Alhamdulillah, in our lessons on Imam Zarnuji's Ta'lim al-Muta'allim, Turuq al-Ta'allum, we have, by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, reached lesson number 6. And we left off last class by looking at something particularly important, which is that the seeker of knowledge should always be consistent in being thankful for the blessing of knowledge and to ascribe knowledge to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he looks at this also with respect to the people of misguidance. And the people of misguidance are sects, but also individuals, right? Are sects like the rationalist sect. So he says that وأهل الضلال أعجبوا برأيهم وعقلهم وطلبوا الحق من المخلوق العاجز وهو العقل لأن العقل لا يدرك جميع الأشياء كالبصر. So he said the people of misguidance were impressed by their own opinions, So they sought the truth from a created and incapable thing, which is their own intellects. Right? Because the intellect, he says, لا يدرك جميع الأشياء. The intellect does not reach knowledge of all matters. Right? Does not reach knowledge of all matters. كالبصير لا يبصر جميع الأشياء. Like the one who can see. They cannot see all things. فحجبوا وعجزوا وضلوا وأضلوا. So they were veiled and became incapable. And they were misguided and they misguided others. How? Because they relied on a created being, which is their own intellect. Right? And this applies to, historically, the rationalist sects such as the Mu'tazilite, right, who said that الإنسان يخلق أفعال نفسه الاختيارية. The human being creates their own willful actions, which is misguided, right? And it's innovation. But it also applies to us if we ascribe the good to ourselves. If we ascribe the good to ourselves, right? If we ascribe the good to ourselves, right? So it's not just with respect to this sect and that, but also with respect to ourselves. If we ascribe the good, our achievement, so we have to be abundant in returning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he quotes that it's reported that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Al-ghafilu man amila bi ghaflatihi, wal-aqilu man amila bi aqlihi." That the heedless person is the one who acts on the basis of their heedlessness, whereas the intelligent person acts on the basis of their intelligence. And what is meant by intelligence here is beneficial intelligence, which is the capacity to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the capacity to seek what is truly of benefit to you. Right? It's not, because true intelligence is not just being very smart. True intelligence is having sharp intelligence. See right? The true intelligence is this capacity to seek benefit, which is what he highlights in the next section. He says, right? فالعمل بالعقل أولا أن يعرف عجز نفسه عن معرفة الحق. The acting on intellect, to begin with, the acting upon intellect to begin with, is to know your own incapacity to know the truth. Your own incapacity meaning by yourself. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله كنز من كنوز الجنة. The realization that there's no ability whatsoever for anything whatsoever, in any way whatsoever, and no power whatsoever, in any way whatsoever, for anything whatsoever. لا حول ولا قوة مطلقا إلا بالله, except by Allah. وما توفيقي إلا بالله. And the realization of this is lutf. The realization of this is lutf, gentle, facilitative grace. Ibn Allan says in his commentary on al-Barahin that tawfiq, divine facilitation, success, and divine grace, lutf, are very close in meaning. And then he says, rahimahullah ta'ala, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من عرف نفسه فقد عرف ربه. So it has come in words so wise that some attributed them to the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. Whoever knows themselves has truly known their Lord. And the ulama who talk about hadiths that are famous on the tongues of people said that this is not ascribed, this is not established at all from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rather, Imam Nawawi says it's from the words of Yahya bin Mu'adh al-Razi. However, there's a very distinct argument made by al-Ghumari, rahimahullah, in his Takhrij Ahadith of Awarif al-Ma'arif, Awatif al-Lata'if, I think it's called, where he makes a different argument. You can see it and assess it if you're a student of knowledge. But the meaning of this is decisively true. The meaning of this is decisively true. Right? من عرف نفسه بالافتقار التام عرف ربه بالغناء التام. Whoever knows themselves as being utterly incapable in of themselves, for themselves, knows their Lord to be absolutely free of need, worthy of all praise. Ya ayyuhan nas antum al-fuqara'u ila Allah. O people, you are the ones in absolute need of Allah. Wallahu huwa al-ghaniyyul hamid. And Allah, He is the one alone, free of need, worthy of all praise. فإذا عرف عجز نفسه عرف قدرة الله تعالى. So therefore, if one knows one's own incapacity, one begins to know the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then the knowing here is the knowing of realization. We all know Allah is powerful. But the arafa here is realizing it, being conscious of it. Comes to know. وَلَا يَعْتَمِدُ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ. So one does not rely on oneself. وَعَقْلِهِ بَلْ يَعْتَمِدُ وَيَتَوَكَّلُ عَلَى اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. Rather, they rely upon and place their trust upon Allah Most High. وَيَطْلُبُ الْحَقَّ مِنْهُ. And one seeks the truth by Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمَنْ يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. And whoever places their trust upon Allah, He is their sufficiency. Right? Whoever places their trust upon Allah, He is their sufficiency. وَيَهْدِيهِ إِلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ. And Allah guides them to a path that is straight. Whoever places their trust upon Allah. And of course, as students of knowledge, we should have clear. If I were to ask you, what's the definition of trust on Allah? The least you should be able to give is a sound description. But if you're a talib ilm haqiqi, you could give a sound definition. If you're a righteous believer, that should be a state in your heart. Right? So he says, other advice for seeking knowledge, he says that وَمَنْ كَانَ لَهُ مَالٍ فَلَا يَبْخَلْ. So whoever has wealth should not be stingy with it. And this is, don't be stingy in providing for other students of knowledge, but also if you have money, help others out. وَاللَّهُ فِي عَوْنِ الْعَبْدِ مَا دَامَ الْعَبْدُ فِي عَوْنِ أَخِيهِ. Allah remains in the aid of a servant as long as his servant is in the aid of their brethren. You see others, I mean all creation in the broad circle, all believers in the more particular circle, all fellow seekers in your contextual life engagement as your brethren. And you want good for them. And one of the ways of good, you are hasty, of course, without folly, to assist them. ابدأ بنفسك ثم من تعول. Beginning with yourself, then those you're responsible for. But then you're helping of them. And one of them, don't waste your money foolishly. Don't waste your money foolishly. You don't need to try out the $200 steak. وينبغي أن يتعوذ بالله تعالى من البخل. And it is necessary to seek refuge in Allah, mighty and majestic, from stinginess. The people of the spiritual path would say, أقبح القبيح صوفي شحيح. The vilest of vile matters is a stingy Sufi. Right? Because a Sufi, a murid, a seeker of Allah, is one who has one goal in life, Allah. So then what are you holding on to? Right? Spend it in pursuit of the one you love. Right? Spend it in pursuit of the one you love. And if you can't, then there's some problems. Then there are obvious problems. And so one should seek refuge in Allah from stinginess. قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أي داء أدوأ من البخل. What sickness is worse than stinginess? Right? What sickness is worse than stinginess? Right? Because and the ulama say, why is this? Many reasons. One of them, like one of the biggest criteria for the virtue or vice of something is, stinginess comes from weakness of certitude. مَا عِنْدَكُمْ يَنْفَدْ وَمَا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ بَاقٍ. What is with you is perishing, will be extinguished, and what's with Allah is everlasting. And then he tells us, rahimahullah, وَكَانَ الشيخ الإمام الأجل شمس الأئمة الحلواني فقيرا يبيع الحلواء وكان يعطي كان أبو الشيخ شمس الأئمة الحلواني فقيرا يبيع الحلواء وكان يعطي الفقهاء من الحلواء ويقول ادعوا لابني فببركة جوده واعتقاده وشفقته وتضرعه بالله تعالى نال ما نال. So he mentions the example that the father of the great Imam, known as Shamsul A'imma, the shining son of scholars, of Imams, Al-Halwani, one of the great Imams of the Hanafi school, his father was poor and used to sell sweets. He'd sell sweets. But he used to give the scholars from his sweets. So he didn't have a lot of money, so he couldn't give in charity to them or support their causes, but he would give them sweets and would say, make dua for my son, so that by the blessing of his generosity, because he was giving despite being poor. Right? Giving despite being poor, because a lot of times, of course, there's meaning in this for students of knowledge. It's not only the wealthy you're called upon to spend. لِيُنْفِقْ ذُو سَعَةٍ مِّن سَعَتِهِ. The one who has expansive wealth should spend of their expansive wealth. And should the poor just keep their money in their pockets? وَمَنْ قُدِرَ عَلَيْهِ رِزْقُهُ. What do they do? فَلْيُنْفِقْ مِمَّا آتَاهُ اللَّهُ. And whoever has limited means, spend from all that Allah has given them. Min, tab'id. From some of all that Allah has given them. Because Allah has given you a lot, and one of the meanings in that is that if you're poor, you may not be able to give of your wealth, but you could give your time somewhere. You could give other assistance. But the believer gives. فَلْيُنْفِقْ مِنْ مَا آتَاهُ اللَّهُ. Right? Let them give from all that Allah has given them. May Allah grant us understanding. And he used to say, make dua for my son, and by the blessing of his generosity and his belief, right? His belief in with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but also in his belief in the righteous servants of God. Right? And as Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi relates in Al-Faqih wal-Mutafaqih, both from Imam Abu Hanifa and from Imam al-Shafi'i, that both said very similar statements. لو لم يكن العلماء العاملون أولياء الله فليس لله ولي. That if the scholars who act on their knowledge are not of the elect servants of God, then Allah does not have elect servants, which is, contrary. But Allah tells us He has elect servants. So, So, because of this and his care and concern and his turning to Allah, his son attained all that he attained. نال ابنه ما نال ويشتري بالمال الكتب. If you have money, what do you do with it? You buy books. ويستكتب, and you commission books to be written. And because in the old days you couldn't just go, like the scribes would have copies of popular books, the books that are some teachers studying, so they'd have copies of them. But if you wanted some big book, you either write it out yourself or you ask for it to be written out. فيكون عونا على التعلم والتفقه. In order for this to be an assistance in learning and gaining deep religious understanding. وقد كان لمحمد الحسن مال كثير. And Muhammad al-Hasan had great wealth. حتى كان له 300 من الوكلاء على ماله. So much so that it is said that he had 300 agents working for him to oversee his money. فأنعمه كله في العلم. So he directed it all towards knowledge, والفقه, and religious understanding. ولم يبقى له ثوب نفيس, and no precious garment remained for him. Outwardly, in reality, nothing was left behind of his wealth but that thobe. Because everything else was multiplied into the hereafter. فرآه أبو يوسف. So Abu Yusuf saw him. في ثوب خلق. So Abu Yusuf saw him in tattered garments or worn out garments. فأرسل إليه ثيابا نفيسة. So he sent to them precious garments. فلم يقبلها. So he did not accept them. فقال عجل لكم وأجل لنا. So he said, it was hastened for you. Right? The pleasures were hastened for you. Because Abu Yusuf was the Chief Justice, the Qadi al-Qudat. And he was wealthy. Right? He was wealthy. And was deferred for us. ولعله إنما لم يقبلها وإن كان قبول الهدية سنة لما رأى في ذلك مذلة لنفسه. And it may be that he did not accept this gift from Abu Yusuf, who was his very own teacher, because he saw that this is putting oneself down, right? Even though it's a sunnah to accept gifts. Well, and he says, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ليس للمؤمن أن يذل نفسه. That the believer does not humiliate themselves. It's said to be related by with similar wording from Imam al-Tirmidhi and others. وحكي أن الشيخ الإمام فخر الإسلام الأرسبندي, so it's said that this great scholar جمع قشور البطيخ أو البطيخ الملقاة في مكان خال فأكلها فرأته جارية فأخبرت بذلك مولاها فاتخذ له دعوة فدعاه إليها فلم يقبل لهذا. It said that this great scholar gathered the leftover rinds of watermelon that were thrown away in an open place, and he was eating from them. And how much watermelon is left in that? So a servant saw him, and she told her master. So he made an invitation for him. When he realized that this because of him seeing his state, he did not accept the invitation. And this mention of many of the great scholars, Shaykh al-Islam Zakaria al-Ansari, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, who taught for about 90 years. At the beginning of his seeking of knowledge, he was so poor that he used to go to the garbage dumps of Cairo and gather food. And in the end, he too had so much wealth that he had people hired to distribute it. And he was not attached to wealth when he didn't have it, and he was not attached to wealth when he had it. Radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And we should know the biographies of our great Imams. And then he tells us, وَهَكَذَا يَنْبَغِي لِطَالِبِ الْعِلْمِ. Right? Says this is how the student of knowledge should be. Right? This is how the student of knowledge should be. أن يكون ذا همة عالية, that they should have high resolve. Right? They say resolve is of 3 levels. Right? Low resolve is attached to the world, is to the worldly. Low resolve is attached to your desires, your whims, and the worldly things, the things that do not advantage you with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Mid-level resolve is attached to your worldly benefit, right? The khayr al-dunya and khayr al-akhirah. High resolve is attached only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the believer, the seeker of knowledge, should have high resolve. They should attach their heart to Allah, that's the highest resolve, or to Allah in the hereafter. And the hereafter is a means, of course, as we know, not as an end in itself. وَأَنَّ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ الْمُنْتَهَى. And truly to your Lord are all ends. لَا يَطْمَعُ فِي أَمْوَالِ النَّاسِ. They are not avid for people's wealth. قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إياك والطمع فإنه فقر حاضر. It's come from the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. Beware of avidness, for it is present poverty, or it is poverty present. ولا يبخل بما عنده من المال, and one should not be stingy with what you have of wealth. بل ينفق على نفسه وعلى غيره. Rather spend it on yourself in good, not wastefully, and upon others. قال النبي صلى الله تعالى عليه وآله وسلم الناس كلهم في الفقر مخافة الفقر. That it is said, that the Prophet ﷺ said, Wallahu alam, that people are in poverty out of fear of poverty. Because if you fear poverty, then you have a type of attachment to wealth. Right? And that is being poor. Right? إِنَّمَا الْغِنَى غِنَى النَّفْسِ. Wealth is only wealth of spirit, which is to be independent of other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Badiyu Zaman, Sa'id al-Nursi, he says, has a fascinating reflection that how come cats are honored through human civilizations, even some took them as gods, even though cats have very few truly high traits of character. Besides being cute and adorable or whatever, what good character traits do cats have? They're very selfish, etc. Whereas dogs have countless virtues. So much so that Ibn al-Marzabani wrote a book, فضل الكلاب على كثير من من يلبس الثياب. The superiority of dogs over many who don clothes. Dogs have loyalty and trustworthiness and reliability and many, many other things. patience. But throughout human societies, they've been looked down upon, deemed filthy, cast away from the cities. Said perhaps a spiritual reason is because dogs have been humiliated in this sense, so to speak. This is not the reality. Dogs are a creature of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. هذا خلق الله. And we love all of Allah's creation because it's His creating. And all of it has divine wisdom. All of it reflects divine mercy. But because dogs attach themselves to creation, so they're abased. Cats, by their attitude, it's as if they demonstrate, I have no need for anything except Allah. Wallahu a'lam. Right? And he says that وكان الناس في الزمان الأول يتعلمون الحرفة ثم يتعلمون العلم حتى لا يطمعون في أموال الناس وفي الحكمة من استغنى بمال الناس فقد افتقر. Said in the first times people would learn a trade and then seek knowledge so that they would not become avid for people's wealth. And it's come in wisdom, whoever is wealthy by the money by others' money has become poor because it can create dependence. Ibn Ajiba and other spiritual masters say that one of the meanings of the hadith of our beloved Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, al-yadul ulya khairun min al-yad sufla, that the upper hand is better than the lower hand. The upper hand is al-yad allati tastaghni an al-khalq. The upper hand is the one that is not in need of creation. Whether it gives or it takes, it is not in need. That's the adab. There's adab of giving and there's adab of taking. That you and لا تأخذ إلا من الله تعالى شكرا. That you only take from Allah out of gratitude. And of course, whoever is not grateful to people is not grateful to Allah, but not out of neediness to them. Be a cat, not a dog. Be a cool cat, not a... Anyways, we won't say it again. والعالم إذا كان طماعا لا يبقى له حرمة العلم ولا يقول بالحق ولهذا كان يتعوذ صاحب الشرع منه ويقول أعوذ بالله من طمع يدني إلى طبع والله أعلم. And there's a similar hadith in Imam Ahmad, but he said that the scholar, if they are avid for others' wealth, they will not preserve the sanctity of knowledge. And they will not speak the truth. They'll say whatever people need to say. And that's why the lawgiver, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, used to seek refuge from avidness that reaches one's temperament. Right? Because you can be avid once and second time, then it goes from being an act to being a trait. نسأل الله العافية. وينبغي للمؤمن ألا يرجو إلا من الله تعالى. It befits the believer to hope only from Allah Most High. ولا يخاف إلا منه, and to fear only from Him. ويظهر ذلك بمجاوزة حد الشرع وعدمها. And this is manifest by going beyond the limits of Allah or not going beyond them. And a book that is one of the great books that would be taught in these lands, and we'd urge you to make it a life companion. It's one of the most useful advices given to me, although may Allah forgive us for failing to act on what people, the counsel of our teachers, in terms of practice, is when I got to Damascus, one of my teachers, who's actually, interesting, not Hanafi, he said that you should strive to learn and act upon Imam Birgavi's work, Tariq al-Muhammadiyya, and strive to be characterized by what's in it, especially in light of the two great commentaries on it. One of the scary things he said, and read the section on not having love for leadership. I'm like thinking, I'm Damascus, like I'm like a poor student of knowledge, can barely pay the bills, but then Allah, the ulama have insight. May Allah forgive us and rectify our states. But a book like Tariq al-Muhammadiyya, especially the section on akhlaq, on taqwa, and the taqwa of the heart, the taqwa of the tongue, the taqwa of the hands. But it's a book of tremendous knowledge. It's like the Ihya of the Hanafis. It has numerous wisdom, particularly with the commentary of Imam al-Birgivi, of Imam al-Khadimi, Abu Sa'id al-Khadimi, and the commentary of Sayyidi Abu al-Hasan, Sayyidi Abdul Ghani al-Nabulsi. And one should have both. If you can't find the old copy, find some way of photocopying it. Inshallah, for the students here, we'll make arrangements to make copies. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. That's a beautiful. So one of Sidi Bilal asked Shaykh Salih al-Ghursi what he should teach in spirituality when he goes back to his home country. And Shaykh Salih al-Ghursi, who's not just a great scholar, but one of the great educators, and one should read his work, Ta'lim al-Muta'allim, and his work on the Madaris al-Diniyya. They're full of benefit and wisdom, like his books. Said you should teach them the Tariq al-Muhammadiyya. Although it's a long book, and often one can teach by teaching from these books. فمن عصى الله تعالى خوفا من المخلوق فقد خاف غير الله سبحانه وتعالى. So whoever disobeys Allah out of fear of creation has feared other than Allah Most High. فإذا لم يعص الله تعالى لخوف المخلوق وراقب حدود الشرع فلم يخف غير الله تعالى. On the other hand, if one does not disobey Allah out of fear of creation, what will they say? For example, and is mindful of the limits of Allah, they have not feared other than Allah Most High. That's the practical, that's the legal, the fiqhi, practical understanding of fearing Allah and fearing Allah's creation. It's not about feelings. So, ooh, I'm so afraid of Allah, but then you act contrary to His limits. Ooh and ah may relate to constipation. They don't relate to deen. وينبغي لطالب العلم أن يعد ويقدر لنفسه تقديرا في التكرار. And the seeker of knowledge should set for themselves and prepare for themselves and set for themselves a certain amount of review. فإنه لا يستقر قلبه حتى يبلغ ذلك المبلغ. Because then your heart would not be set until you reach that level. وينبغي أن يكرر سبق الأمس 5 مرات. And he gives one example. So, for example, one should review the previous day's lesson 5 times. وسبق اليوم الذي قبل الأمس 4 مرات. And the lesson from the previous day 4 times. وسبق الذي قبله 3. And the lesson from before that 3 times. والذي قبله 2. والذي قبله 1. And the one before that once. فهذا أدعى إلى التكرار والحفظ. Because that is closer to proper review and retention. Because you want to retain the knowledge. And there's many ways to do it. One of the scholars who later is now one of the greatest Shafi'i scholars alive, without exaggeration, Shaykh Amjad Rashid, what he had done with Shafi'i books, so you break it down into parts. Right? Whatever section you're studying, Tahara and Salah, break it down into parts and turn into a wird. That you read one section daily, right? Repeatedly each day, but also go through the sections fully. So you're doing 2 things. There's a section. So for example, you divide Tahara and Salah into 7 parts, for example. So you repeat one section daily to retain it. But you're also going through all the text on a weekly basis. And of course, you also have to write it out. And there's other methods like this, but thoughtful review is the only way knowledge sticks. Nobody cares what you've studied. What matters is what you know, and of course what you act upon and embody. وينبغي ألا يعتاد المخافة في التكرار لأن الدرس والتكرار ينبغي أن يكون بقوة ونشاط, and one should not simply silently review. That's one of the things people do, just sitting there like you're dead. Okay? Right? He said because lessons and review must be done with resolve and vigor. A lot of times you're in class, you think, okay, we should just do 4 takbeers because everyone looks dead. Right? Everyone looks dead. وَلَا يَجْهَرْ جَهْرًا يُجْهِدُ نَفْسَهُ. But you don't raise your voice so much that it tires you out. كَيْ لَا يَنْقَطِعَ عَنِ التِّكْرَارِ. Lest you no longer continue to have the strength to review. فَخَيْرُ الْأُمُورِ أَوْسَاطُهَا. So the best of matters are the most moderate. And it doesn't have to be loudly, at least to make it audible to yourself. There are many works on how the brain functions. Is one of the many good books on it. It's called Brain Rules. And one thing is, the more senses you involve in something, the closer it is to retain. And he'll tell us some of the keys to this. So he says, وَحُكِيَ أن أبا يوسف كان يذاكر الفقه مع الفقهاء بقوة ونشاط وكان صهره عنده يتعجب منه في أمره وكان يقول أنا أعلم أنه جائع منذ 5 أيام ومع ذلك إنه يناظر بقوة ونشاط. So he said that it is related that Abu Yusuf would review fiqh with the fuqaha with vigor and strength. And his son-in-law would be with him and find it amazing. It says, I know he's been hungry for 5 days. Hungry meaning he's not eaten properly. Right? And despite that, he debates and discusses with strength and vigor. Right? وينبغي ألا يكون وينبغي ألا يكون لطالب العلم فترة فإنها آفة. It is important for the seeker of knowledge not to have periods of slacking off because it is a grave harm. It is a grave harm. My own sister was getting married. I asked permission to go back to Toronto. Initially, my teacher said no. I had to explain why it's important. Then I was given permission. If you insisted on no, I wouldn't have gone. But I was told that but my wife should stay back in Damascus. Says because if you break routines, it is ruin. Right? If you break routines, it's ruin. There used to be a scholarship, some of the leading scholars in the West, you're not allowed to go back for the first 2 years. Right? Right? Because otherwise, and the recommendation was only go back every 2 years if you need to. Right? Like you have parents and so on. وكان أستاذنا الشيخ الإمام برهان الدين يقول إنما غلبت على شركائي بأني لم تقع لي الفترة والاضطراب في التحصيل. He says that my teacher Imam Burhan al-Din, meaning al-Marghinani, said that I got ahead of my contemporaries because my partners in study, because I did not have periods of slacking off and unsettledness in seeking knowledge. Right? We're just sharing with some of the shuyukh. Even the day Sheikh Adib Kallas's brother died, in the morning he was still having classes. Even though at night his brother had died, in the morning he conducted his classes. رضي الله تعالى عنه ورحمه. وكان يحكى عن الشيخ الإمام علي الإسبيجابي أنه وقع في زمان تحصيله وتعلمه فترة 12 سنة. So it's related from al-Isbijabi that during his time of seeking knowledge, there's a time of slacking off of 12 years. بانقلاب الملك, because there was an overthrow of the rule. وخرج مع شريكه في المناظرة ولم يترك المناظرة. And he went and he headed out away from their homeland with his partner in discussing and debating knowledge. But they did not leave debating knowledge, even though they're not able to continue their actual study. وَكَانَ يَجْلِسَانِ فِي الْمُنَاظَرَةِ كُلَّ يَوْمٍ. But even though they're cut off due to the turbulence in their lands from study, they would daily discuss and debate together. وَلَمْ يَتْرُكَا الْجُلُوسَ لِلْمُنَاظَرَةِ 12 سَنَةً. And they did not leave sitting together to discuss and debate for 12 years. وَكَانَ شَرِيكُهُ شَيْخُ الْإِسْلَامِ لِلشَّافِعِينَ. And his partner was the Shaykh al-Islam of the Shafi'is, rahimahumullah. وكان شافعيا, he was Shafi'i. وكان أستاذنا الشيخ فخر الدين قاضي خان يقول ينبغي للمتفقه أن يحفظ نسخة واحدا من نسخ الفقه ويكرر دائما فيتيسر له بعد ذلك حفظ ما يسمع من الفقه. So he says, and from that we gain that Imam al-Zarnuji was a student both of Burhan al-Din al-Marghinani and also of Fakhr al-Din Qadi Khan. And they mention in Usul al-Ifta and in the Rasm al-Mufti, La yufta bi khilafi Qadi Khan. You don't give fatwa contrary to Qadi Khan. Of course, it's hyperbole, it's mubalagha, because of how great a standing Qadi Khan had in the madhab, radiyallahu ta'ala anhum wa nafa'ana bi anfasihim. You say that the student of fiqh, the seeker of religious understanding, should always have a copy of a text of fiqh with them. And one should be repeating it at all times. What are you doing walking down the street? I'm listening to a podcast on the good life. What are you doing? I'm reading about how to make better shawarma or doner. Right? Just go buy some, right? شغل طالب العلم ورد طالب العلم علمه. The routine of the seeker of knowledge is their knowledge. Otherwise, one's just joking around. So, and if you do that, you'll be able to retain not only the text that you're working on, but also, because if you have a text that you know in each subject, then other things you hear, they'll get connected back to the text that you know. Because the mutun one memorizes are like frameworks for the rest of one's knowledge. Then he has a section on reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because talab al-ilm, all things that are worthy require effort and sacrifice. All things that are worthy require effort and sacrifice. Right? Going towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا, and those who strive with their utmost for our sake, لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ, we will surely guide subulana, to the pathways to us. Right? And if you seek high matters, you will be tested. So you have to have reliance upon Allah. Seeking high matters like climbing on a mountain. Walking straight in the countryside is straightforward. Just don't fall into a pothole, you'll be fine. Climbing a mountain can be scary. There are boulders and challenges and all kinds of things. So you have to take the right step, but you also have to rely on Allah. Right? Because one of the main reasons people fall when they're climbing mountains is they become nervous. They're looking left and right, they're looking below, and they don't take a sure step. Right? And of course, lack of trust in Allah is also from weakness of faith and also weakness of intellect. Weakness of faith because we know that He is Ar-Rahman, He's Ar-Rahim, He is Ra'uf, all the divine names, but also his weakness of intellect is going to do it anyways, might as well do it with less stress. Right? So there's weakness of faith, also weakness of intellect. Because you can't do it yourself, so might as well consign it. Right? And the most practical way of consigning it is to consign it to the only one who can help you, who is Allah. ثم لا بد لطالب العلم من التوكل في طلب العلم. The seeker of knowledge must have reliance upon Allah in seeking knowledge. وَلَا يَهْتَمُّ لِأَمْرِ الرِّزْقِ, and one should not be overly concerned about the matter of your provision. وَلَا يَشْغَلْ قَلْبَهُ بِذَلِكَ, and one should not busy one's heart with that. وروى أبو جعفر روى أبو حنيفة عن عبد الله بن الحسن الزبيدي صاحب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم: من تفقه في دين الله كفاه الله تعالى همه ورزقه من حيث لا يحتسب. It's related with this chain of transmission, and Wallahu subhanahu wa ta'ala, that it has come that whoever gains knowledge with respect to the religion of Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of their concerns and provide for them in ways they could never imagine. And you could just read Surah Al-Talaq verses 2 and 3 for clear manifestation of this reality. فإن من اشتغل قلبه بأمر الرزق من القوت والكسوة فقلما يتفرغ لتحصيل مكارم الأخلاق ومعالي الأمور. He said, and the reason for this is that it is rare that one whose heart is directed towards concerns about earning a living and having enough to eat and clothing, and that you will have enough time to dedicate yourself to acquiring praiseworthy character and the high matters. Because the seeker of knowledge is not only seeking knowledge, you have to focus on the knowledge, you have to also focus on acting upon it. You have to focus on changing yourself for the better. إن أردت الدرك ذي المعاني فأبدل روحك قليلا فينا. If you seek to attain these meanings, then change yourself a little for our sake. قيل دع المكارم لا ترحل لبغيتها واقعد فإنك أنت الطاعم الكاسي. Right? And it said in mocking that leave. So this is mocking the one of foolish. Leave aside praiseworthy character. Don't journey to attain it. And just sit around doing nothing, because you're the one who feeds and you're the one who clothes. Of course, it's the opposite. That don't worry about these foolish things, because you're not the one who provides and you're not the one who هو الذي يطعمني ويسقيني. He is the one who feeds me and gives me to drink. قال رجل لمنصور الحلاج رحمه الله تعالى: أوصني. فقال: هي نفسك إن لم تشغلها شغلتك. It said that Mansur al-Hallaj, one of the most controversial people in history, controversial because of his ecstatic statements. The ecstatic statements, insofar as they're outwardly problematic, are problematic. Insofar as they're ecstatic, are excused. The Al-Hallaj, outside of his ecstatic statements, was a person of undeniable deen and taqwa and khair and salah. Right? Wallahu subhanahu wa ta'ala alam. He said, so if someone asked Al-Hallaj, advise me. He said, it's your self. It's yourself. If you do not busy it with good, it will busy you. Right? And النفس مجمع الصفات الذميمة. Yourself is the gathering place of blameworthy traits. So you gotta be a diplomat. You have to busy your blameworthy traits with something praiseworthy, otherwise it'll do what it's there to do. Right? And one of the practical things for that is lower your gaze, not just from the opposite sex, but lower your gaze. You're walking down the street. You don't have to notice who's there. You don't have to notice all these worldly things. Sufyan al-Thawri was walking with his students, and they passed by on the road with some houses that had fancy balconies and stuff. Some of his students started looking up. He said, lower your gazes. He said, it is only gazes such as these that resulted in extravagance such as this. نسأل الله اللطف والعافية. Allah. فينبغي لكل أحد أن يشغل نفسه بأعمال الخير حتى لا تشتغل نفسه بهواها. So it's befitting for each person to busy themselves with the acts of good, lest their self, which is your lower self, the gathering place of blameworthy traits. Yourself is not you. You are not yourself. لست نفسك. That nafs here, your fleeting, worldly, animal qualities. كالأنعام. That's your animal self. Your real أنت بالروح لا بالجسم إنسان. You are by your soul, not by your flesh and bones, human. Shaykh Abdul Rahman al-Shaghuri says, أنا بالجسم هباء أنا بالروح سماء. By my body, I'm mere dust. By my soul, I am sky. ولا يهتم العاقل لأمر الدنيا. An intelligent person would not be worried about the matters of this life. لأن الهم والحزن لا يرد المصيبة. Because worry and sorrow does not turn away the tribulation. ولا ينفع, it will not benefit you. بل يضر بالقلب, but it hurts the heart. والعقل, and the mind, because you sit there worrying, but you actually don't do anything. That's why the ulama say you have to distinguish between worry and concern. Worry is when you think about matters that you are wary of, but you don't do anything about it. That is foolishness. And it's debilitating, as the author tells us. Concern is when that worry gets connected to a plan. So don't worry, what's going to happen if I don't get my iqamah? Turn it into a concern. And one of the practical things to do is make an appointment with yourself. Okay, I have 7 problems. Okay, I'll tackle 1 a day. And set an appointment. Go grab yourself, make yourself a good coffee, sit down, give yourself a deadline. 30 minutes to make a plan. Then anytime the worry comes, say, I have a plan. And one of the other things to do with worries is go ask. Go ask your teachers. I'm worried about this. I'm worried about that. You should do that even when you're older. Helps. وَيُخِلُّ بِأَعْمَالِ الْخَيْرِ, and such worry and it prevents one from acts of good. And rather the believer should concern themselves with the matter of the hereafter. لأنه ينفع, because that is what benefits. Because that is what benefits. That is what benefits you, is to put your concern with the next life. And then he says, وَأَمَّا قَوْلُهُ صلى الله عليه وسلم إن من الذنوب ذنوبا لا يكفرها إلا هم المعيشة. That it's come in a tradition that there are sins that are not averted except by having concern for earning a living. فالمراد منه قدر هم لا يخل بأعمال الخير, is a level of concern that does not lift you from doing the good, which is that there are some sins that are caused by being lazy. What are you doing today? Nothing. So you just sit there. The empty mind is the devil's workshop. Okay? So you have concerns, you go earn a living, you do work, you do productive things. That is the positive concern. That is concern. That's not worry. Right? What you don't have is worry. Sitting there, I wonder how my test results are going to be. Would thinking about it change anything? No. Concern would be make dua, make ibadah, give sadaqah. So it doesn't affect doing the good. ولا يشغل القلب شغلا or شغلا يخل بإحضار القلب في الصلاة. And it doesn't busy your heart in a manner that prevents you from being present of heart with the prayer. They say there are three, some of the ulama have said there's three key criteria with respect to the three barometers for your faith. نسأل الله العافية. But this is transmitting what the ulama say. غفر الله لنا لي. First is, how is your presence of heart in the prayer? Is it increasing? Means you must be doing some good things, or just a pure favor from Allah. Be grateful, whether just purely from Allah or Allah has facilitated good. Either way, increase the good that has been facilitated. So you're going earlier to the masjid. You find your prayer was much better. You're less distracted. So you thank Allah for the facilitation, but do more of what was facilitated. Try to make it early to all the prayers. You found that you didn't sleep so late. You're able to pray the sunnah and fajr and routines better. Okay, that is, you cultivate. Second is, how are you when upset? How are you when upset? And thirdly, how is your character with the people you're most responsible for? Your parents, your spouse, your children. And وقيل غير ذلك. Because فإن ذلك القدر من الهم والقصد من أعمال الآخرة. Because that degree of concern for earning a living and resolve is from the actions of the next life. طلب الحلال فريضة بعد الفرائض. And then he talks about reducing worldly attachments. So he says, وَلَا بُدَّ لِطَالِبِ الْعِلْمِ مِنْ تَقْلِيلِ الْعَلَائِقِ الدُّنْيَوِيَّةِ. It is absolutely necessary for the seeker of knowledge to reduce worldly attachments بقدر الوسع, to the extent possible. وَلِهَذَا اخْتَارُوا الْغُرْبَةِ. And this is why they sought to live abroad, because it reduces worldly attachments. In Damascus, the Mashaykh of Sham would say that the students from Halab and Hama benefit more than the students from Damascus. Because the students who'd come from Halab and Hama and other cities, they're not in general, they're great students and ulama from Damascus, but those who would come from out of town, they didn't have family, they wouldn't have social commitments, etc. So you reduce those commitments. How do you reduce them? Ask your teachers. Ask your teachers. That how do you maintain your family commitments? And we should benefit not just from the dars of the teacher, but also from how they are. And a lot of people, they neither visit their teachers, they never have their teachers over at their house, they never spend time with their teachers before class, after class, they don't serve their teachers. So the teacher was just like a talking machine, right? Just watch a video. ولا بد لطالب العلم من تحمل النصب والمشقة في سفر التعلم. It is absolutely necessary for the seeker of knowledge to bear toil and difficulty in traveling to seek knowledge. كما كان سيدنا موسى كما قال سيدنا موسى عليه السلام في سفر التعلم ولم ينقل عنه في غيره من الأسفار. Right? As Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam said, right? Where did he exert himself? Was in the journey of seeking knowledge, and it's not related in his many other journeys. If you know the life of Sayyidina Musa, his life was numerous, long, difficult, distressful journeys. قوله تعالى لقد لقينا من سفرنا هذا نصبا. Truly, we have indeed found or met in this travel of ours, which is the travel for seeking of knowledge, great toil. Nasaba, right? And it's in the indefinite because it's great toil from Surah Al-Kahf. وليعلم أن سفر التعلم لا يخلو من النصب لأن طلب العلم أمر عظيم وهو أفضل من الغزاة عند أكثر العلماء والأجر على قدر التعب وَالنَّصَبِ. He said, know that traveling for learning is not free of toil, because seeking knowledge is a tremendous matter. And it's better than jihad in the path of Allah, ghuzat, military expeditions for the sake of Allah, according to most of the ulama. And reward is to the extent of toil and exerting oneself. فَمَنْ صَبَرَ عَلَى ذَلِكَ. So whoever remains steadfastly patient in that, وَجَدَ لَذَّةً تَفُوقُ سَائِرَ لَذَّاتِ الدُّنْيَا, shall find a joy and a sweetness that goes beyond all worldly joys. ولهذا كان محمد بن الحسن رحمه الله إذا سهر الليالي وانحلت له المشكلات يقول أين أبناء الملوك من هذه. So Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when he stayed up deep into the night and some difficult issue became unpacked for him, would say, where are the children of kings from these joys? Yes, Siri didn't catch that. Inshallah, we'll try to uphold these meanings again. Inshallah, we take a good meaning from Siri. Thank you, Siri. We'll try to, and this is why Shaykh Adib Kallas in his 70s, when this Kurdish student, who I was really annoyed by, after Shaykh Adib, he read to him poetry with a heavy dialect in in refutation of Ibn Sina. I said, finish your class. Let me have my turn. He said this poem. I have to admit, it was actually pretty good. Shaykh Adib memorized it and read it back to his student, right? With childlike joy. With childlike joy. That's amazing. Right? Why? Because, and you see amazing examples of the exertion. That's why it is absolutely incumbent for all students of knowledge to read the books of seeking knowledge. We've mentioned before some of the books on talab al-ilm. It's very important also to read the key books of one of the great luminaries of the 20th century, Shaykh Abdul Fattah Abu Ghudda. One reads first قيمة الزمان عند العلماء, the value of time according to the scholars. If you haven't read it, read it. If you've read it, read it again. Second, his work Safahat min Sabr al-Ulama, pages from the patience of the scholars in seeking knowledge, etc. And amazing, real stories. Number 3, his work Al-Ulama al-Uzzab الذين آثروا العلم على الزواج, the single scholars who preferred knowledge to marriage. And of course, it doesn't mean if you're married, don't read the book. Because it's not a call to be single. It's a call to be dedicated. It's a call to be dedicated. And we moved to our new house, and partly it's because I'm a little more expansive than my wife. And we have a supermarket right behind our house. Our house faces a strip mall. We have a supermarket there. First 5-6 years there. Were you there when we entered the supermarket? First 5-6 years living there, I'd never entered the supermarket because my wife didn't want me to distract myself, and also she also wanted to safeguard the family budget because my thing was, when in doubt, buy both. So my wife's trying to be, take care of the home economics, but also so I wouldn't waste my time. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless and protect her and all our families. That is tremendous blessing. Right? وينبغي لطالب العلم ألا يشتغل بشيء آخر غير العلم. And it befits the seeker of knowledge not to busy oneself with things other than knowledge. ولا يعرض عن الفقه, and don't turn away from fiqh. And this here is talking about the science of fiqh. Why? What is needed by people? That's also is listen to your teachers. I decided at one point in Damascus that I wanted to dedicate myself to reading the books of tafsir and spirituality, because I'm not going back to the West, whatever. What my teacher said, focus on fiqh, because that's what people need. I didn't want to do it, but just listen to your teachers, and and subhanallah, if people ask 100 questions, the majority of them are in fiqh. And the majority of them, most students of knowledge can't answer them, even though in the first books they studied. قال محمد بن الحسن من أراد أن يترك علمنا هذا ساعة فليتركه الساعة. Muhammad al-Hasan said, whoever wants to leave our knowledge, even for a moment, should leave it right now. Right? إن صناعتنا هذه من المهدي إلى اللحد. This craft of ours is from the cradle to the grave. The great linguist and very interesting scholar, Shaykh Abdul Ghani Daqar, the author of Mu'jam Qawaid al-Lugha al-Arabiya. I used to run into him most mornings when I was going to Shaykh Adib Kallas, and he'd grown quite old, a bit senile, very elderly. He lived on the ground floor, Shaykh Adib in the second basement. He says, وين رايح? I won't go into the whole thing. عند الشيخ أديب والله كوي حلو. طلب العلم من المهدي إلى اللحد. Seeking knowledge from the cradle to the grave. Says, أحب طالب العلم يجتهد. I love the seeking of knowledge to strive. They say the same things every time. One of the reflections on that is because what he was saying, it was so ingrained in him, even when, in his elderly age, his memory became weaker, and he wouldn't remember. I'm the same guy you said this to yesterday and the day before and last week and the week before. It's because it became so ingrained in him, because this is really important. So I told Sheikh Mu'min Al-Annan that. He said, listen to it every time as it's the first time you're hearing it, because it's true. I said, shukran Sidi. I just telling Sheikh Mu'min, I thought it was funny, but he turned it into a lesson. ودخل هو وإبراهيم بن الجراح على أبي يوسف يعوده في مرض موته. So Muhammad ibn al-Hasan and another visited Abu Yusuf on their deathbed. وهو يجود بنفسه, and he was struggling with his own life. فقال أبو يوسف له أرمي الجمار راكبا أفضل أم راجلا. And he asked him, that is stoning the jamarat better, riding or standing? فلم يعرف الجواب, and he did not know the answer. ثم أجاب بنفسه, and then he was able to respond himself, because even while dying he was reviewing fiqh after a lifetime spent not only learning and teaching but serving the ummah. The court system for over 1,000 years in Islam was on the systems unpacked by Al-Qadi Abu Yusuf. وهكذا ينبغي للفقيه أن يشتغل به في جميع أوقاته. Such it is that the faqih should be busy with their fiqh at all their times. فحينئذ يجد لذة عظيمة في ذلك, and then you will find a tremendous joy in it. وقيل رؤيا محمد بن الحسن في المنام بعد وفاته فقيل له كيف كنت في حال النزع فقال كنت متأملا في مسألة من مسائل المكاتب فلم أشعر بخروج روحي. It's so cool. It is said that Muhammad al-Hasan was seen in his sleep after he died, and he was asked, how was your state when your soul was being taken from your body? He said, I was reflecting on an issue from the chapter on the mukatab slave, and I did not feel the departure of my soul. قيل إنه قال في آخر عمره شغلتني مسائل المكاتب عن الاستعداد لهذا اليوم. It said that he said at the very end of his life, the rulings related to the mukatab, what they call the bonded slaves, busied me from preparing for this day. وإنما قال ذلك تواضعا, and he only said that out of humility. He only said that out of humility. And this is the kind of attitude of dedication that the seeker of knowledge should have. Of course, this is overstatement, but they did not do this because of the issue itself. Right? It's like if we repeat in the Quran, Surah Abi Lahab, we're not declaring war on Abu Lahab or something. This is divine guidance. Right? So when we repeat knowledge, it's because this is what is understood from the Quran and the Sunnah. Right? This is our duty as people connected to the prophetic inheritance to preserve the gift of guidance that Allah and His Messenger have gifted us with. Right? This is the most precious of matters. Right? It's the most precious of matters. Right? So this is how we strive to be. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Next session, inshallah, will be our last session, بإذن الله. And we're going to begin by looking at what are times of the day to seek knowledge. The Prophet ﷺ said, وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالْغَدْوَةِ وَالرَّوْحَةِ وَالشَّيْءٍ مِّنَ الدُّلْجَةِ. Seek assistance in the early mornings, the ends of the days, and something of the depths of the night. And these are three of the most auspicious times. Ibn Abi Jamrah, in his amazing commentary, Bahjatul Nufus, on Mukhtasar Sahih al-Bukhari, he said, it's these times, but in general, it is the times when you have clarity of mind and vigor. Make the most of the times when you have focus and dedicate them to knowledge. As the poet said, Shaykh Abdul Rahman al-Shauri, Sahi faghna mil ma'asha. Dear friend, make the most of your living. Kam maytin atahu aasha. How many a dead one did Allah grant life? Hasha an yakhiba hasha man ata bi sidqin niyya. Never ever would he ever let down one who comes to him with true intent. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.